Okay, ready? Let's do this. Last year, we finished our 25th episode of Unedited, from idea to manuscript and shelf to screen. The idea for the podcast was to take people into the story process, from the germ of an idea to a market-ready manuscript, onto shelves, both digital and physical, here and abroad, and finally, into adaptation and to screen. We wanted to do this by having on some of the most influential people in the global story economy for a low-key, unedited discussion. We wanted the Inkshares community to leave each episode not just entertained, but a bit better informed on both the creative practice and business practice of story. In our first season, we had on not just Inkshares writers, but one of the biggest book-to-film agents of all time, the former chairman of one of the world's biggest talent agencies, the producers of multi-billion-dollar franchises like Tom Clancy's Jack Ryan, actors helming major BBC series, and the originating publisher of Harry Potter. We learned a lot and laughed a lot. The podcast grew from the dozens of downloads an episode to the hundreds of downloads an episode, and people from around the global story economy began reaching out to us. But as we entered the fourth quarter of last year, new books in development, new books going out to market, new deals in Hollywood, and new additions in the families of Inkshares, including mine, Unedited went, like so many drafts, into the drawer. 2026 is now well upon us, and we spent some time over the break trying to figure out how, with our packed schedules and young children, to keep getting this podcast out. We're going to continue to do long-form, in-person interviews when our schedules allow. But when we're short on time, but long on things to talk about, we're going to keep it run and gun, AirPods, and iPhone. We're also going to play around with format, including not just shorter, on-the-fly conversations, but also quick audio essays like this one. That brings us to this episode. I want to talk about sequels. For more than 10 years, we've been living in the world of remakes, reboots, and sequels. A Stephen King book from the 1970s or 80s we've already read and adapted before? Of course. Carrie, It Chapter 2, Firestarter, Pet Sematary. Remake it. People watched it? Fantastic. Let's make a sequel. Add to this The Exorcist, or Halloween, or Candyman. It extends far beyond horror, though. A Star is Born again. The Thomas Crown affair this year, That Dirty Dog. Don't forget Disney, which in the last 7 years has remade Beauty and the Beast, The Lion King, Dumbo, Aladdin, Mulan, The Little Mermaid, and Snow White. It's remaking Moana this year for live action, which only came out 5 short years ago. But it's not just movies, it's series too. American Gigolo, still got the abs. Presumed Innocent, just swap feature for series. Harrison Ford for Jake Gyllenhaal, and the Rolex Datejust for the Cartier tank. Interview with the Vampire, tape's still rolling. The Lincoln Lawyer, he's still billing. We don't even have the decency to wait a decent interval anymore. People want Dexter again already. The 156 people he killed in the first 8 seasons weren't enough. Game of Thrones just ended. However will I slake the thirst of my inner savage? Outlander hasn't been on for a whole year. What are we to do? From The Lord of the Rings to The Little House on the Prairie, from Baywatch to Full House to Punky Brewster, nothing is off the reboot remake limits. The Desperate Housewives are back on Wisteria Lane. Friday Night Lights is going into overtime again. The list goes on, with nothing seemingly bigger than the incoming Harry Potter reboot for series. That's right. The demand for reboots is so high that not even J.K. Rowling's declaration that men have penises and women have vaginas could keep Hogwarts out of Hollywood's cancel corner. Look, there's nothing wrong with revisiting classic stories and giving them new life and new meaning for a new generation. One of my favorite movie-going experiences as a young person was going to see the 96 De Palma Mission Impossible with my father, who had grown up on the show. But to borrow a nugget of wisdom from another 96 gem, sometimes when you make a copy of a copy, it's just not as sharp as the original. Part of this has to do with how difficult it is to get people to pay attention to anything in the age of the internet. Just like in real life, we aren't zoned to build new cities anymore, so we have to continue to renovate or build on top of the cultural metropoli built in the age of monoculture. Here's the reality, though. Our presidents are too old, our senators are too old, and by and large, our stories are too old. But that's the thing, isn't it? We're not just streaming in a world filled with sequels and reboots and remakes. We're actually living in a world that is the sequel, the reboot, the remake. We're in Donald J. Trump Part 2 after a divided America narrowly chose not to renew the Biden series with its joyful new lead. Israel and Palestine are in their 4th, 5th, 6th sequel since 1936. The Democratic Party is decaying into a reboot of its century-ago war between Debs gradualists and Leninist radicals, now focused on a warmth of collectivism that seems to have forgotten 100 million dead people in the 20th century. Remember them? The people that died in the Gulag archipelago? They don't get rebooted because they're dead. The Republican Party is similarly decaying into a remake of the battle between Buckley and the Birchers. Tucker Carlson, now starring in the iconic role originally made famous by Father Charles Coughlin. Anti-Semitism, rebooted. Isolationism, redux. Cold War, legacy. Marxism, ghost protocol. On top of this year, as America made off with an unelected, narco-trafficking strongman in Nicolas Maduro, it was hard to not feel that this was Noriega, The Return, from everyone's favorite Don't Fuck With My Hemisphere series originally starring James Monroe. Whatever you think about capitalism or socialism or Marxism, about isolationism versus interventionism, this is a show about story, not politics after all. It's impossible to not realize that we aren't just living in a world replete with remakes and reboots and sequels. We're living in the remake, reboot, and sequel. Our art, if we want to call it that, perhaps entertainment is a better word, is a mirror of our life and globe. Or maybe it's the other way around. But with Disney licensing its content late last year to Sora, it seems that we won't just be living in the world of sequels, but the world of individualized sequels. You want far-left Antifa Cinderella? You can have her changing genders from one movie to the next as she opens borders, redistributes wealth, returns stolen indigenous land, and reads your favorite surah. You want Cinderella seeking her border-closing psycho-spiritual completion in the form of one strong-jawed, thirst-trapped prince drawn from the ranks of Ice each movie? You can have that too. Not only can you have a sequel, you can have your sequel. In a world where we don't concede elections, why concede stories? Over this holiday, I sat down a few nights to watch some of my favorite movies with my nearly 3-year-old daughter, beginning with Home Alone. She was, in a word, enthralled. In every way that matters, the movie has not aged, even though Macaulay Culkin is now older than Joe Pesci was in the movie. It's an amazing mashup of A Christmas Carol and every child's dream of parentless freedom morphing into a nightmare. The next day, her face lit up as I explained to her what a sequel was, and that there was, wait for it, another Kevin movie. While it's true that you never forget your first, to the degree that a sequel can eclipse a first installment, Home Alone 2 Lost in New York comes damn close. It hits all the same highs, knows what components to keep, knows which components it can dial up, and what new components it can add without fundamentally changing the dish. If Christmas movie nights were Home Alone, New Year's movie nights were Crocodile Dundee and its sequel, Crocodile Dundee 2. And for me, Dad, on a rainy Bay Area winter day, I managed to sneak in Die Hard 1 and 2. Both based on novels, interestingly by different novelists. The recipe was the same for each sophomore outing. Replicate where you can, replace wisely where you must, and wrap up everywhere you can. Don't jump the shark, but get right up next to it. And by the way, make sure it's the biggest fucking shark we've ever seen. These sequels work because the movies are fun, and the sequel is in on the fun with you. They're trying to be the best sequels, not second originals. At the same time, I had the privilege of reading the first draft of Scott Thomas's Kill Creek sequel over the break. If you don't know Kill Creek, it follows the world's 4 biggest horror authors after they're invited by an eccentric mogul to spend the night at an infamous haunted house. Always wanted to go to a haunted house with Stephen King? Here's your shot. Kill Creek sold more than 100,000 copies, was praised by Joyce Carol Oates, won the American Library Association's Award for Horror Book of the Year, was shortlisted for the Stoker, and has been featured 3 times in the New York Times, which called it so scary they only dared to read it in the daylight. In the intervening time since its publication 8 years ago, Scott wrote the incredible NPR Praise Violet and a collection of short stories called Midwestern Gothic that won a Shirley Jackson Award. But here we are, 8+ years later, revisiting the same characters, surviving and non-surviving, of Kill Creek, including what remains of the house. Why? Well, for a lot of reasons, but amongst them, that Scott missed them as much as readers had. Also, because the faint opening left at the end of the last novel had become an itch that needed to be scratched. And because Scott, after a lot of time, had the germ of an idea not for a new book, but for a sequel. So each night, I put my daughters to bed and went to bed myself thinking about the stuff of sequels. Fundamentally, what is the connective tissue that makes something a sequel? Is it a subsequent story with the same protagonist? Is it an extension of the previous storyline? Need it only exist in the same world? The questions go on. Does a sequel need to know it's a sequel? Must it, like the house on Kill Creek, be self-aware? Does a sequel have to live inside the parameters of its progenitor installment? When and how, like the house on Kill Creek, can it break free? Is there one basic formula for success with sequels, or are there many? What's the difference between a sequel and a series? Are sequels just the happy accidents of catching lightning in a bottle, rather than the carefully crafted, aforethought worlds of Harry Potter or Lord of the Rings that exist inside of one larger, unresolved mother conflict? Is every additional season of TV a sequel? Every episode? Why are there so few sequel books amongst the trend for series? We're raised on all these book series, the Chronicles of Narnia, the Boxcar Children, Harry Potter, but there are so few sequels in the sense that The Lost World was truly a sequel to Jurassic Park. Why? If books come before their movie adaptations and books long preceded movies, what's the secret history of book sequels? How, if at all, have the series reread growing up shaped us for the world of sequels and franchises and universes we live in as adults? These are a few of the many questions we'll be exploring in audio essays and conversations this month on our sequel season of Unedited, From Idea to Manuscript and Shelf to Screen. You are my second daughter. I will never call you a sequel. Is what you did to your diaper? Is what you did to your diaper a sequel? Is that a sequel to the first installment this morning? Is that a sequel? Do you have a sequel poop? Let's go change your sequel poop.